Welcome back. My name is Mohammad Abu Siddiq, Assistant Professor at Potokali Science and Technology University, Bangladesh. Today, I will talk about the principles of land use planning. Land use planning is the systematic assessment of land and water potential, alternatives for land use, and economic and social conditions in order to select and adopt the best land use options. So in this process, one can identify the best alternative option. It should be sustainable, socially and environmentally compatible, socially desirable, and economically sound. There are several principles of land use planning. The first principle of land use planning is it is oriented to local conditions in terms of both methods and contents. Planning approaches often fail because global models and implementation strategies are applied and taken over automatically and uncritically. But land use planning is not a standardized procedure which is uniform in its application worldwide. Its content is based on an initial regional or local situation analysis. Land use planning considers cultural viewpoints and builds upon local environmental knowledge. Rural societies or groups can often provide complex indigenous knowledge of the environment. If this is the case, such knowledge should be part of the basis for planning and implementing a sustainable land use. Land use planning takes into account traditional strategies for solving problems and conflicts. Traditional rural societies have their own way of approaching problems and settling conflicts concerning their land use. In the process of land use planning, such mechanisms have to be recognized, understood, and taken into account. Land use planning assumes a concept which understands rural development to be a bottom-up planning process based on self-help and self-responsibility. The population should actively participate in the process of land use planning. The results of planning and the implementation of measures can only be sustainable if plans are made with and by the people, not behind them or even against them. Planning is therefore not just a matter of expert, but should be carried out together with those affected by it. To ensure a feeling of the ownership concerning self-help activities, people who are affected have to be involved in the planning process from the early beginning. Land use planning is a dialogue creating the prerequisites for the successful negotiation and cooperation among the stakeholders. The core task of the land use planning consists of initiating a process of communication and cooperation which allows all participants to formulate their interests and objectives in the dialogue. On the basis of sound decisions, a sustainable form of land use is proposed whereby the aims and interests of the other participating groups are taken into account to the greatest possible extent. An important element of participation-oriented land use planning is the identification of the various groups of participants and differentiating them in terms of their use of and access to land resources. In addition, their position on the social scale and their capacities either as a stakeholder or as member of the authorities and of other organizations have to be considered. Land use planning is a process leading to an improvement in the capacity of the participants to plan and take actions. The participatory methods used in all planning steps of land use planning promote the technical and organizational capabilities of all participants, thereby extending their capacity to plan and to act. In the medium term, this qualification process leads to an improvement in the capacity of local groups for self-determination. Land use planning requires transparency. Therefore, free access to information for all participants is a prerequisite. Transparency in planning and the extent to which stakeholders are informed strengthen both their willingness and capacity to participate in planning and decision-making process. It increases the motivation of the people for creating sustainable results. An open exchange of information leads to a discussion about the objectives among the key figures and promotes the willingness to reach a consensus. The dissemination of information in the local languages contributes to an improved transparency. In addition, it strengthens the trust of the population in land use planning activities. The differentiation of stakeholders and the gender approach are core principles in land use planning. A prerequisite for realistic land use planning is the detailed analysis of the various interest groups. The aim is to find out the various interests of the participants in order to create a basis for the negotiation and decision-making process. Men and women often do not have the same access to land and have specific ways of articulating themselves. Different interests are arising from the economic, social character of their roles and scope of duties. Therefore, the role of gender is an important criterion when differentiating stakeholders. Land use planning is based on interdisciplinary cooperation. The ecological, economic, technical, financial, social, and cultural dimension of land use make it necessary to work with an interdisciplinary approach. Land use planning provides many interface with other technical disciplines and planning fields. It uses a broad spectrum of tools. A one-sided view of planning will be avoided due to the interdisciplinary and intersectoral configuration of the planning groups. Land use planning is an iterative process. It is a flexible and open reaction based on new findings and changing conditions. Land use planning is more than the preparation of a planning document. It is an iterative process. Iteration is both the principle and the method simultaneously. New developments and findings are specifically observed and incorporated into the planning process. It may lead to the revision of the decisions and the repetition of the steps already taken. This can render further both analysis and data bases which would have been set up at some expense. Iterative planning requires flexibility in planning, but in no way constitutes a concealed lack of planning. Land use planning is implementation oriented. Land use planning has to consider how the negotiated decisions and the solutions identified are to be implemented. Land use planning does not end with the land use plan. The implementation of immediate measures such as the development of cultivation techniques which conserve land resources right at the outset or parallel to the land use planning process plays an important role in increasing the trust of the people in the villages as far as the planning process is concerned. Thank you for watching this video. We will discuss about the planning process, focus areas and different levels of planning in the next video.